charging the upper limits of discretionary council tax to long-term empty properties and to the threshold for non-domestic rates. These will help ensure a fair contribution is made through taxation, and for holiday lets, they make a clear contribution to local economies. Our consultation on groundbreaking proposals for the planning system closed on the 22nd of February, drawing an extremely large response rate, as did the consultation for the Welsh language communities housing plan. We're also currently consulting on local variation of land transaction tax.
Could I remind you of the time, please?
Yep, absolutely, Nick, I will. Alongside our commitments on affordable housing. And then conference, a lot to say on housing and climate change, I'm afraid. So conference, just turning then last to the two motions. We support absolutely the Brecon and Radnor motion, and I'm very pleased to see it here. On the composite motion, we absolutely support the policy principles there. We are absolutely committed to all of the things that that motion calls for. Unfortunately, in government, we also have to make sure that the laws that we pass are not challengeable. We know that rent control will be unpopular with the private rented sector and that they will judicially review us if we do not follow their process. So, conference, we have to follow that process. We have to consult properly without predetermining it, and we have to go through with a white paper process in order to make sure that that legislation bites. So I understand the eloquence and the need for speed of those in the private rented sector. We will implement the Renting Homes Act to make that situation better, and we will go through the process to make sure that in Wales we have the best housing policy anywhere, not only in the UK, but in Europe. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you, Julie, and thank you, Conference. It is an important debate, as the Minister said. We now move to the votes, which will be by a show of hands in the first instance. So motion 7, all Wales housing first. The WEC recommendation is to support. So all those in favour, please. Thank you. Any against? That's carried unanimously. Composite A, renting. The WEC recommendation is to oppose. So all those in favour, please. Thank you. Any against? We'll go to a card vote for that. I will take composite B first, shall I?
Can we take composite B first?
Can I take composite B first before we go to the card vote, Conference? So composite B is the safe travel. The WEC recommendation is to support. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? Thank you. That's unanimous. So we're going to go to
vote 3.
Card vote 3 it is, please.
Told you. Yeah, well, yeah.
Could just get the...
You have done it for 2 years, Nick, so...
Because inevitably though...
It split CLP and trade union.
I predicted it would go to a card vote. Joe was like, no, I could just feel the mood in the hall, couldn't you? Yeah.
Card vote 3, yeah.
Yeah, it's card vote 3, tell us.
For me, because it's my CLP. I wasn't there when they did it.
Oh, right.
Because I was talking at another different... Do you see that?
So you'd have been able to...
So I had been able to talk them out.
Can you hold your cards up, please? So the tellers can take your cards. It's card vote
3.
Card vote 3. Thank you.
On composite A.
On composite A.
The language of the Labour Party is really arcane, isn't it?
Good job, Dave Bazina knows what he's doing.
It's frustrating, isn't it? Especially for youngsters who are really struggling. We know they're struggling.
Can you ask delegates to stay in the seats just to make it easier for the tellers?
We won't get a law.
Can delegates please stay in the seats whilst we're conducting the card vote so it makes it easier for the tellers, please? With that, 3 people get up and move on.
It's difficult.
Herding cats comes to mind. It's very exciting. We're so conference, we shut the door so nobody can leave.
Yeah. Well, I think we're supposed to do that here, to be honest.
Oh, right, okay.
And nobody can come in.
That's on a knife, isn't it?
I think we're done.
Yeah,
They're not really.
green light from Dave, yeah.
We'll announce the results of card votes at the end of the session.
Thank you, conference. We'll announce the results of those card votes at the end of the session. Conference, we now move on to the Welsh Labour Democracy Review report, which hopefully you all have had time to digest. This has been the work of many years and is only the beginning of our process to improve our democracy. Thank you to everybody who's been involved in this process. Can we have order, conference, please? Recommendations 3 and 4 are changes to Welsh Labour rules, so will require a card vote and will be separate card votes. I will explain the details at the end of the debate. The other recommendations will be by show of hands. To introduce the report, it says here on the script, is the outgoing chair, Nick Ireland. So I think this was written for somebody else. So I'll be able to thank myself later for giving this report. Conference, transforming and modernising our party isn't just about ensuring we keep up to date with the latest in campaigning and technology. It's also about ensuring we continue to look at our internal processes and democracy so that we're able to focus on campaigning and representing our communities. The Welsh Labour Democracy Review started back in 2018, looking at how we can continue to improve our party's internal democracy. It is important at the beginning of this debate to put on record the WEC's thanks to all those members, party units and affiliates who have shared their views in successive rounds of consultation. The outcome of the Democracy Review was delayed by a series of unforeseen events, from snap elections to the difficulties of COVID and the disruption it has caused all our lives. What we are asking you to consider today, conference, is some relatively straightforward decisions that will clear the way for the continuing Democracy Review to deal with some more complex issues in the future. So I'll now set out those recommendations. So recommendation 1, the WEC has agreed that the current round of Westminster re-selections should continue on the rules as set out by the current UK party, with the procedural guidance already agreed by the WEC. Recommendation 1 sets out that we can call on the NEC to propose an amendment to the UK rules to provide Scottish and Welsh Labour the devolved powers to make their own rules into the reselection of MSs and MPs. This would need to be devolved by UK Conference before Welsh Conference could set out its own rules in the future. Recommendation 2. Our CLPs in Wales are currently based on Westminster and Senedd constituencies. Precedent has already been set for the NEC, respecting the wishes of devolved nations in Scotland, with Scottish Labour organising on Scottish parliamentary boundaries. With Conference yesterday agreeing, in principle, to look at our changes to our Senedd and the Westminster boundary review still ongoing, this recommendation simply asks that we are given further time to have more discussion on what boundaries we organise in Wales. Recommendation 3. The WEC has previously committed to relaxing the rules of what can be discussed at this conference. This rule change offers this conference further flexibility and scope to discuss matters directly affecting Wales that are not explicitly devolved. As this is a rule change, it requires a card vote. I hope you are all listening to Philippa's announcement earlier and have picked up your card votes in good time. So recommendation 4, this is simply about updating the language in our rule book to reflect recent changes to the language we use, for example, AMs to MSs. Although relatively straightforward, as this is a rule change, it also requires a card vote. And finally, recommendation 5, these are further recommendations that the WEC will look at and bring any further proposals or changes back to a special conference. Thank you. Right, this is where I thank myself for all the work I've done on the WEC, so thank you, conference. I think I've done a fantastic job. If anyone would like to speak in the debate, please indicate now. I'll take speakers in rounds of 3, and you have 3 minutes each. Darren, speaker there.
Chair, Conference, Darren Williams, Cardiff West CLP, speaking in support of the WEC statement on the Democracy Review. The launch of the Welsh Democracy Review 4 years ago provided an opportunity to take a critical look at the way we do business in the Welsh Party, with a view to making our structures and procedures more inclusive and accountable. It's a shame that the review has ended up taking as long as it has and producing relatively little so far in the way of tangible results, albeit for reasons we all understand as being beyond our control, the snap general election in 2019 and obviously the COVID pandemic. Of course, the review had one very significant outcome early on when it was agreed to introduce one member, one vote for elections to the Welsh leadership and deputy leadership, a big step forward for democracy in our party. There have been a few other significant changes since then as well. For example, the introduction of OMOV elections for the Welsh seat on the National Executive Committee. And I have to say that is largely down to the personal commitment to greater democracy on the part of Mark Drakeford that we have had the changes and the progress that we have made in that time. The changes that are now proposed in this paper are relatively modest and hopefully uncontroversial, but still welcome. And I'm particularly pleased that in recommendation 2, we will have the ability, if this is agreed, to debate issues that are not devolved but have a particular effect on Wales. Some of us have been campaigning for this change for nearly 20 years. I remember in 2003, a couple of weeks before the invasion of Iraq, when the Welsh Labour Conference in Swansea was probably the only political gathering anywhere in the world that wasn't allowed to discuss the impending conflict, when 5 emergency motions covering the likely impact of that conflict on Wales were all ruled out of order under the very restrictive rules that we had and that we still have. That's a ridiculous situation which we will hopefully now change. It's good that we were able to discuss yesterday the motion on the Ukraine, but I have to say that I think that is down to a fairly generous interpretation by the Standing Orders Committee of the current rules. If this change is made, then there will be a presumption in future that motions of that nature will always be able to be discussed, and that is a good step forward. Finally, I'm also pleased that the areas in recommendation 5 are going to be subject to further work by the WEC, and that there is a commitment in principle to explore those things. So first of all, opening up the nominations process for leadership and deputy leadership elections to allow party units and affiliates to take part and hopefully ensure the widest possible choice of candidates in future elections, and also looking at making more of the positions on the Welsh Executive Committee directly elected by the people that those members represent, therefore making the party more democratic and accountable. So please support this WEC statement, and let's make sure our party is as democratic as it can be.
Hello, Conference. Cian Ireland, Dwyfa Meirionnydd, CLP. I want to speak specifically in favour of recommendation 2, especially in light of our CLP motion for Conference being ruled out of order. This motion, put forward by a local GP member of our CLP, eloquently explained the pernicious impact of Tory privatisation of GP services in England on Welsh GP services. Unfortunately, due to the present rules, this motion was ruled outside the competence of the conference. Looking at wider issues, we constantly see from HS2 through to spending decisions in England that have a direct impact on budget implications for the Welsh Government through the Barnett formula. It is crucial that we have an ability to discuss these issues here and are able to articulate a voice from the Welsh Labour movement about these problems. Please support recommendation 2 and make sure that we can discuss issues that impact us here in Wales from England. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you, conference. There was no other speakers, so we're going to go straight to the voting now.
Philippa's going to close.
Oh, sorry, Philippa's going to close the debate. Sorry, Philippa. Philippa, who is our new WEC chair.
Yeah, congratulations.
Thank you, Nick, and thank you for your contributions today, not just in the debate, but also in the democracy review itself. And as Nick has already said in his introduction, this has been a long and winding road to get here, so I am grateful for all those that have taken the time to contribute, particularly in terms of expertise. Contributions to these process came from across all our movement, and that's really important to note. The steps we are asking the conference to take today are relatively straightforward, as highlighted by Nick, in their scope, but do open the door for us to have more complex and in-depth discussions about the future of democracy in our party here in Wales. And as the incoming chair of the WEC, I know our committee stands ready to take on these new complex conversations and challenges as we look forward. And importantly, bringing those decisions back to you and your members and affiliates at a special conference. A reminder that this is only one stage of that journey, improving democracy in our party, not the end. And as the WEC, we know there is much work to be done, and we look forward to working with you and our members of the party and units, affiliates, as we continue this process. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you, Philippa. So I'm going to move to the votes now. For simplicity's sake, I'm going to take show of hands for recommendations 1, 2 and 5, and then we'll conclude with the card vote. When we go to the card vote, could I ask the conference to remain seated? Don't all dart off out for a coffee, please, because it does help the tellers when they're trying to collect the cards. So recommendation 1 on reselection of MPs. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? That's carried. Recommendation 2 on conference motions. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? That's carried. Recommendations 5 on a special conference. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? That's carried. Okay, and now the card votes. So card votes on recommendation 3 and 4. Can I have the tellers ready, please? You hope you have your card vote packs. Recommendation 3 is card vote 1. And recommendation 4 is card vote 2.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they're different colours, aren't they? So
Yeah. I don't know what the colours are, otherwise I'd have told you.
they don't matter, does it?
I'm going to tell them to hold them up like we did last
Can you hold them up in the air really clearly, please, delegates? Thank you.
I'm missing some tellers.
Just give them time to do it.
Cool. I think we're back on time now.
Yeah.
You all right? How are you? I didn't spot you. Sorry. How was your
Yeah, it was really well turned out for 9:30 in the morning.
Good.
Especially considering that some of the young members didn't go to bed till 4 last night.
Well, there you go. That's even better.
No, I've been thoroughly impressed with conference so far this year.
Yeah.
I've been asked by a delegate for the card vote. So the recommendation 3 is card vote 1, and recommendation 4 is card vote 2. And the WEC recommendation is to support both. A bit late in the day to say that.
It's a wet statement, so I hope so. We wrote it all. It's a wet statement, so I hope so.
Yeah. But I forgot to say that. I think it was bleeding obvious.
Was property heroes?
Yeah, brilliant place, yeah. Lots of space, but we ended up going outside because it was lovely.
All right.
And they let us move the benches around.
Oh, lovely.
Big table, long table.
Amazing.
Yeah, good location. It's a bit far, but
Yeah, I did say it was quite way up. But it's a nice space, I thought. Nice, sort of, it's out of the way. It's a really big space inside, so I thought it was nice. Thanks for saying that.
how was the dinner last night?
It's like going to work.
Joined by stealth.
I know. Wasn't great.
I think we're done, Nick.
We're done, are we?
Yeah. Don't know where. Have we got our platform party for them? Let me just find out.
Jeremy's here.
Jeremy's here.
That's the main thing, isn't it?
And Deb's already here. Yeah.
All right, okay. Thank you, conference. Is that all done? Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Right. Conference, the final policy debate of Welsh Labour Conference 2022 is on education. This debate includes motions 8, 9 and 10 and composite C. If you're moving one of these motions, please get ready. But first, just checking you was there after Hannah. But first, we're going to hear from Jeremy Miles, Minister for Education and the Welsh Language. Jeremy.
Pronounced Art Conference, and it was with great pride that I speak to you this afternoon as the first Welsh Labour Education Minister to address our conference in 6 years. Mae gan rhan fwy ohonon ni yn y neuadd hon le arbennig yn ein calon I addysg. Most of us in this hall today have a special place in our hearts for education. We know that education is the greatest driver of social justice and of an equal and prosperous society that we have. Many of us wouldn't be here without it. I know that I wouldn't be. Education changed my life. I had inspiring teachers who encouraged me, challenged me, expanded my horizons. So, conference, my priority is to make sure that our schools and colleges are enabling every one of our pupils to do their best and to be the best, whatever their background, whatever their circumstances, with our schools providing high standards and aspirations for all. But today, conference, we know that the Tory cost of living crisis is a huge burden in our society. So what is our response? Well, we're putting Labour values into action. On Friday, we announced that families will continue to benefit from free school meals over the school holidays. I want all children and young people in Wales to have access to a healthy and nutritious meal in school and during the holidays. Conference, no child should be going hungry. And from September, we'll start to roll out our plans for every primary pupil in Wales to receive a free school meal during term. And today, conference, I'm announcing that every family that receives help with the costs of the school day, uniforms, gym kits, school trips, will have an extra £100 top-up on that support, an additional £13 million to support those families who are struggling most. That is the difference a Welsh Labour government makes. And it's a Welsh Labour government that is the first in the UK to ensure every new build school will be net zero carbon, that has a plan to increase the number of Black, Asian and minority ethnic teachers and leaders in our schools, that is providing The gift of a book for every child to encourage a love of reading. That's increasing funding to our youth work sector. That's increasing Welsh medium school places and delivering free Welsh language education lessons to all 16 to 25-year-olds and all teaching staff to help deliver our goal of 1 million speakers. That's committed to the principle that higher education is available to anyone who can benefit from it at any point in their life. And putting into law lifelong learning, which so many of us in our party cherish. Such an important part of our history, and it will be an important part of our future again. Wales as a nation of second chances, where it's never too late to learn. And in September, we roll out our new curriculum, which will help make sure every child leaves school with the knowledge, skills, and experience they need for life. We'll be teaching all our young people the value of self-esteem, self-confidence, and what safe, healthy relationships look like. When I became the minister, I asked Estyn to review sexual harassment in our schools when we heard from girls and young women of their experiences. Their report makes it clear the scale of the challenge that we face and how important the new curriculum will be. I fully support the principles behind all 3 motions on this issue today. We'll ask Conference to support the Cardiff South and Penarth motion, and we'll work with partners to explore the proposals in the other 2 motions, but don't for now feel able to support them as we roll out our VAWDA SV and RSE work in schools. And I'm proud that for the first time, every child will have access to an LGBT+ inclusive education. Conference. I'm the Education Minister, but I'm also a gay man, and I know what it's like growing up, struggling to work out your place in the world when none of your school life reflects your experience. Well, we can be proud, Conference, that no child in Wales should ever have that experience again. Now, we couldn't do this without our incredible teachers, teaching assistants, and our school workforce, and I want to pay a special tribute for the extraordinary work they've done in the last 2 years. Last month, we unveiled a plan to support our teaching assistants. This month, I'll be announcing additional funding to support the mental health and well-being of our school staff. And we are committed to giving supply teachers a fairer deal. I fully share the aims in the motion today. Not all of the actions proposed are within the powers of the Welsh Government, so it's been agreed to remit the motion. But Conference, we'll be taking radical action to ensure that supply teachers are supported and are treated fairly. Conference, just as education can shape the course of an individual life, it can shape the course of a nation too. Gives us a chance to thrive together as a country. High standards and aspirations for all, a bilingual society, a nation of second chances. That is the education system we are building in Wales, and that is the education system that will help us build the stronger, fairer, greener Wales we want to see. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Jeremy. And now on to the 4 motions. Motion 8 is on music education, and appropriately enough is moved by the Musicians' Union.
Prynawn da. Conference, I'm Stephen Williams, 50% of the delegation from the Musicians' Union. The other 50% over there. Conference. Every one of us in this room is affected by music in one way or another. There'll be many of you who are musicians, those with formal training, perhaps those who play an instrument in a band or as a hobby, or perhaps just those of you who love a good sing in the shower. But at whichever level we experience music, it's undeniable that music is a hugely important part of all our lives. That famous optimist, Friedrich Nietzsche, said that without music, life would be a mistake. Wales is known internationally as the land of song. We punch above our weight culturally. Many people in different countries will know of Wales because of Shirley Bassey or Tom Jones, and our choirs, brass bands, and a host of other musicians and music groups represent Wales on the international stage. Conference, we in the Labour movement have a responsibility to protect this important part of our national life and to ensure that future generations are given an education with music at its centre. That is how we will retain our land of song status. I know from my experience as a peripatetic music teacher that schools who have music at the centre of school life are schools with happier pupils who become confident through music. Some pupils shine in sports, some shine in maths, some shine in science, design or language, some shine in music. But the difference with music education is that we ask families to pay for instrumental and vocal tuition in schools. This hasn't always been the case. Prior to Tory austerity, we had well-funded music services who organised teams of peripatetic music teachers to take music into schools to train the next generation of musicians at no extra cost to families. This ensured that children who wanted to learn an instrument or to have singing lessons could do so regardless of their parents' financial means. Because of the difficult decisions that schools and local authorities had to take under Tory austerity, music education is no longer open to all. The charge for vocal instrumental tuition in many schools is upwards of £180 a term. And with the cost of living crisis only getting worse, this will be an amount that many people will simply be unable to afford. This motion on music education states that every child in Wales should have access to high-quality music education, and that lack of money should not be a barrier to children experiencing this. As a teacher, I never, ever again want to hear a child tell me that Mammy can't afford to pay for the lessons. Conference, the Musicians' Union recognises the commitment made to establish a National Music Service for Wales in the programme for government, but we also believe that we need a national plan for music education to underpin and guide this service. At its core should be a commitment to make Wales a world leader in music education. We can do this, and we should do this. Where musician teachers are supported and paid fairly to deliver this, and where no child misses out because of lack of financial means, we must have universal access to music education. At a time of global instability and with conflict in the world increasing, we can give our next generation the ultimate weapon of peace and collectivity, music. To paraphrase Nietzsche, it would be a mistake to not have music at the heart of our national life through education. Conference, I move.
Thank you, Stephen. Next up is motion 9 on supply teaching from the Socialist Education Association.
Conference, Prynhawn Da, Sheila Jones, Socialist Education Association, and a passionate advocate for supply teachers in Wales being shown that they're valued, not being talked about that they're valued, but being shown in their paying conditions that they are indeed valued. And I'm grateful for Welsh Government for the work that they are doing. I'm afraid we didn't get very far with the previous Cabinet Secretary for Education, but I know Jeremy Miles is as passionate as I am about changing things. It's a complicated issue, and we are very grateful for that work. This has been going on for quite considerable, well, the exploitation's been going on since the agency started, and one particular agency in particular has been one of the worst exploiters. Anyway, this has been going on for some time, but Welsh Government put their own inquiry into supply teaching in 2015. That now is, how many years ago? Work it out, 7 years ago. And here we are still talking about the same issues. But we, in the Welsh Labour Plaid cooperation agreement, there was a definite commitment to reversing outsourcing. Outsourcing in a public service coming back in-house. How good is that? I've heard also that there have been discussions in the WLGA, but at the moment there are still no decisions on anything. So conference, despite the framework agreement, which was a step in the right direction, there is still exploitation. There are agencies who have signed up to this agreement, the 6 good terms in it, what they're going to do, pay the minimum pay rate, give an uplift of pay after 12 weeks, and they are not doing it. Some of them are not doing it. Even now, today, when this came in 2019, I had a call while I was here from a member saying that she hasn't had her uplift in pay after 12 weeks. How demoralising is that? She should have been paid to scale from day one when she's in a long-term position. She's already lost 12 weeks of that, and now she's not having an uplift of pay after 12 weeks. There are cases actually going to tribunals now. That's going to be costly for councils. This is shocking. Honestly, this is truly, truly shocking. This is our teaching workforce for our children. Where did sorry, I lost my place now. So we've got the EWC figures out this week, last week, as it so happened. 537 supply teachers are no longer registered with the EWC, so that they've been lost since 2019. There is a crisis. It's in the paper. It may be in other parts of the UK, as has been pointed out to me, but it's here. It's here in Wales. There is a crisis. And if there is not a supply teacher when a teacher is off, those children are being turned away from their classes. This is so crucial. So there's 76% of supply teachers work for agencies. So that's 76% of supply teachers who can't get into the teachers' pension scheme. How shocking is that? The contribution for the employers into the teachers' pension scheme is 23.68%. From an agency is 3 to 5%. How disadvantaged will those people be in their old age now when they can't get into that? That's shocking as well. Oh, God. I've been on this a long time. I've been working on this a long time, believe me. I retired in 2017. I think lobbying's become my hobby now. It wasn't intentional, I can tell you, but that's how it is. I just feel so passionately that these people should be treated properly. This is workers' rights. This is all about workers' rights. This is workers' paying conditions, but even so, it's even more than that, which I'll tell you now in a minute. So these, going back to the 76% who they're not on a national pay scale either. So if they do a few years, they can still be on that minimum pay rate because the agency agreed to pay that. And even some agencies are not paying that. There are agencies working off the framework. There's 40 other agencies in existence who haven't signed up to any terms and conditions. And one of them is employed by one authority. Most of the schools in that authority use it, and they're paying £100 a day, which is well below the minimum rate that was agreed. So they're losing out on a day-to-day basis. So the fight for this is not just about paying conditions. It's about our local authorities having oversight on who is going into their schools. We need to know who these people are. Cover supervisors are coming in. They're not qualified. Why do we want cover supervisors in our education system? Why do we want anybody in any school who is not qualified? This thing of having the oversight of the local authorities having oversight of who's going into their schools was remarked on in 2015 in the CYP report on the inquiry into supply teaching, and it was given high priority. This is not happening because these people are coming from agencies and we just don't know who's going in there all the time. I'd like to abolish the cover supervisor role, and I'd like to do it today if possible. But anybody who's a parent in here, do write to Welsh Government. Do tell them you don't want a cover supervisor looking after your children. Do tell them you don't want any unqualified person coming into a classroom, whether they've got a degree or they haven't got a degree, whether they work with children for 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. Oh my God, sorry, I haven't finished yet. So I've got a few important bits here. The motion asks for county councillors to go, I'm sure you want to hear the rest, don't you? This motion is asking for county councillors, anybody who's on a governing body, to go back to their schools to ask them to employ supply teachers direct. You can give them all the reasons I've just given you. This is ethical employment. This is the correct use of public money. This is doable. So you go ahead and do it, please. To get a world-class education system, we need a properly funded we need it properly funded, we need to be given the high priority it deserves. All staff in education need to be highly qualified, highly trained and properly remunerated. Everyone in this room, I'm sure, I'm fully aware that a high-class education is one of the core levers for the eradication of poverty and improving life chances for our children. Please help me make it the very best it can be. I'm afraid I missed a vital part in the motion. It was written by somebody else, and at the end, there's a little bit that's not doable by Welsh Government, so I'm forced to remit it. But you have all heard it, and you can all go and take action.
Thank you, Delegate. Thank you. Conference now. Motion 10, challenging sexual harassment and violence among adolescents, which is moved by Cardiff South and Penarth CLP.
Good afternoon, Conference. I'm Camilla Lovelace from Cardiff South and Penarth CLP. First time at Conference, first time speaking. And that's a bit of a hard act to follow there. Thanks, Sheila. I'm moving this motion on challenging sexual harassment and violence among our adolescents. I can't take the credit for writing the motion. That belongs to Morgan Fracknell, our new CLP Women's Officer, who is setting up a women's branch for us. So I'm not going to speak about the intricacies or the history of the motion, but rather I'm going to speak from the heart, briefly, about the why and the how. By this, I mean why our motion is needed now and how the things we're calling for will make a lasting difference to everyone in Wales. Why? Why do we need to challenge this behaviour amongst adolescents? Because research shows it is so prevalent and because we all know it is so harmful. As a survivor of domestic abuse, I know sexual harassment and violence can ruin lives. I was lucky. I had a good response from the police service and support from wonderful people in the voluntary sector. But, Conference, more importantly, I'm speaking here today as a long-serving secondary school governor with lead responsibility for safeguarding. We need to take preventative action now in our schools. And it's during adolescence, was attending schools, that attitudinal education can have the greatest impact on all our young people. I therefore call upon the local government, the police service, the youth service, our NHS, voluntary sector organisations and other partners to work with our young people in our schools, taking the whole school approach to reduce sexual harassment and violence among adolescents. We must promote a culture of respect, equality and empowerment for all. I move the motion. Thank you, Conference.
Thank you, Delegate. And finally, Composite C, which is also on the topic of challenging sexual harassment and violence among adolescents, moved by Cardiff North Women's Branch.
Hi, my name is Helen Thomas. Helen Jackson. Sorry, that's my maiden name. My name is Helen Jackson. Do we say maiden name anymore? Sorry, oh God, go home now. Isline CLP. Delighted to be here to move the motion, the composite motion, put forward by Isline CLP and Cardiff North Women's Branch, and to add our voices to those who are concerned at the endemic level of sexual harassment as well as bullying and homophobia in the educational sector across Wales and the rest of the UK. We believe that the points we raise here will give the Welsh Government some indication of certain areas where we believe greater clarity is needed to safeguard Welsh children and young people, specifically girls in education. We would encourage the Welsh Government to go beyond their current guidance in an attempt to halt the rising tide of what Estyn refers to, quite ambiguously in our opinion, as peer-on-peer abuse. I say ambiguously because in reality, the report does reflect that it is in the main girls and young women in education who are most affected. Women's Aid, in responding to Estyn's report, commented that public bodies, including schools, must prioritise prevention of violence against women and girls, aiming for schools to create a culture of respect, equality and empowerment. And I know, Minister, that that's something that you're very much aiming to do. I guess that the crux, I'm going to go off script a little bit, could be dangerous, but still. I guess the crux of what we're asking you to do is to perhaps clear up some of the inconcise language, so it's clear that what schools will be talking to young girls and to girls and women about is the nature of violence based on female sexual violence and female and the nature of the sex bias and violence towards women and girls. We think that to be more explicit is really important, rather than use some of the neutral language of the RSE, etc., in talking about children, pupils, young people, peer, when it may be more relevant to talk about girls and women. In fact, there appears not to be one document for school that supports an understanding of the very specific context that is sexual harassment and misogyny and abuse to girls because they are female, that they are oppressed and abused by reason of their sex. We look to schools to not only give girls and young women the tools and insight they need to resist the effects of an increasingly misogynistic environment, but also to consider issues such as pornography, which causes such harm to young people in Wales. It normalises coercion. It promotes risky, dangerous practices such as choking. And I have written here lack of consent. We are talking about pornography, so I think that's really not necessary to say. Clearly, any steps taken or guidance issued around the subject needs to involve male as well as female pupils. It's important that topics such as these are approached on the basis of sex, as we know that girls and boys are affected differently by sexual harassment, homophobia and abuse, and react differently. The whole school approach, which is mentioned in the motion and that Camilla mentioned during her motion, identifies an approach that can be delivered in educational settings within localities. Key players need to be engaged, including parents, as well as teachers, governors and young people. The focus of such approach identifies several areas around campaigning, safeguarding, participating, etc. Really about changing the culture and developing those partnerships, as Camilla has already mentioned, with outside agencies such as police and social workers. This approach goes beyond training packages with an expectation of a trickle-down effect, but requires schools to work in far more depth with external providers. It's not unreasonable for educators, parents, and in particular our children and young people to expect a robust and wide-reaching code and guidance on RSE married to a whole school and locality approach to challenge sexual harassment. In order to deliver this, it is vital that the Welsh Government seeks services from credible, experienced external providers measured against the highest standards in delivering a research-based strategic approach. We believe that providers should also be able to deliver practical advice and support from a neutral, non-political position based on safeguarding guidelines, which we know our teachers and educators are more than familiar with. Conference, we ask you to call on Welsh Labour to commit resources to trialling this approach in selected schools across Wales to determine whether it is possible to address and reverse the unacceptable level of sexual harassment, bullying and violence amongst adolescents in Wales, and particularly that towards girls, and to strengthen the teaching of the causes of sex-based violence against girls in schools and in society. Please support this motion. Diolch yn fawr, Conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Delegate. This is jointly moved motion with Isline and Cardiff North Women's Branch.
Prynhawn da, Conference, thank you, Chair. Bronwyn Davies, Cardiff North Women's Branch, speaking in support of Composite C. Firstly, thank you, delegates, for agreeing that the topic of sexual harassment and violence against women is a priority for discussion at conference. Having said that, the mover of the composite motion and myself were puzzled to be asked to remit the motion to the WEC, and we wondered if the WEC had overlooked the immediacy of the action that we are asking conference to support. All we want is a letter informing the Minister, the Minister of Education, of who of course is here and will see the result for himself, the First Minister and the Minister for Equalities, a letter to go next week, if possible, informing them of whether conference supports the principle behind this motion. It is an urgent matter, and I just want to explain why. Our concerns arose from a report by Estyn, which is, I'm sure you know, the Education Inspectorate in Wales, called We Don't Tell Our Teachers, Experiences of Peer-on-Peer Sexual Harassment Among Secondary Schools in Wales. And it was only published last December 2021, just over 3 months ago. Among other things, the report found that the majority of pupils had personal experience of peer-on-peer sexual harassment, and a large percentage, even larger, had reported seeing others experience it. So 61% of girls had personal experience, and over 80% reported seeing others experience. Conference allowing sexual harassment to become common normalises it. And in effect, it grooms both girls and boys, whether they're victims or the perpetrators, into accepting that personal boundaries can be disrespected with impunity. And this is not acceptable. The report stated that staff in schools asked for guidance and clarity on what constitutes sexual harassment to enable a shared and coherent understanding across schools, and they want whole school staff training. A key recommendation was that secondary schools should adopt a whole school preventative and proactive approach to dealing with peer-on-peer sexual harassment. Mention has been made of the fact that Welsh Government is in the process, has just completed a consultation on the refresh of the Violence Against Women strategy. So the refresh is from 2022 to 2026. And the consultation was actually published the day before the Estyn report. So naturally, it couldn't comment or refer to the Estyn report itself. But those responding to the consultation did. And Welsh Women's Aid, for instance, commented, there should be a commitment to investing in the delivery of the whole school approach. And the need for action comes about, the need for action now comes about, because the consultation is a high-level document and quite rightly relies heavily on the new RSE curriculum to deliver behavioural change among school pupils in Wales, which Jeremy Miles referred to so eloquently in the introduction to this section. The Estyn report makes it quite clear that more than this is required. And we are suggesting a pilot project which would enable the pilot project could enable the whole school approach to be used in selected schools across Wales now, so that by doing this, Welsh Government will soon know whether the whole school approach leads to better outcomes compared to relying solely on the new RSE curriculum, delivered by already overstretched teachers who are asking for more support. So that, conference, is why we're asking you to vote for our motion. Thank you very much. Diolch yn fawr. Please support it.
Thanks, Delegate. Thank you, everyone. I'm going to take contributions from the floor. This is obviously the last debate of Conference 2022. Delegate there. Delegate at the back in the tie. Yeah. Sorry. And the delegate right at the very back, waving her hand now, yeah.
Good afternoon, Conference Chair, Jane Gebby, Unison. I'll be very quick. I appreciate this is the last debate of the morning. The new curriculum includes a mandatory age-appropriate element, relationships and sexuality education, which will be taught in both primary and secondary schools in a way that is developmentally appropriate and replaces the current requirement for sex education in secondary schools. Under RSE, learners will learn about more than sex in a biological sense, but a broader concept of sexuality and what constitutes a healthy and an unhealthy relationship. This should foster more understanding than you would hope for, but I think within this we need to make reference to those providing the teaching to have the necessary resources and training to be able to do this. It's such a sensitive and emotive subject, and not all education professionals will necessarily have the appropriate skills. There's also no mention in the motion of LGBTQ+ people. The report referred to evidence of substantial personal experiences of verbal homophobic harassment, with many saying homophobic bullying is happening all the time. And that contributes to why generally pupils do not tell teachers when they experience sexual harassment, because it happens so regularly, it's become normal. That's really sad, Conference. This has to be considered when steps are taken to end sexual harassment in schools. So with this caveat, we urge Conference to support this motion. Thanks very much.
Hello, Conference. I'm Derwent Fay, delegate for Aberconwy CLP, and I would like to speak on the motions about sexual harassment. For the reference, I use they, them pronouns, and I'm gender fluid. First time my gender has been applauded, so thank you. Listening to the motion, I worry about the presence of the talk of sex-based rights and sex-based discrimination, because this isn't an issue of sex. This is an issue of gender. We need to make that very clear. Thank you. Data from the ONS in 2020 showed that 28% of trans people have experienced a crime, have been a victim of a crime in the last 12 months. That is double the figures for cis individuals. This is not just an issue of women being abused. This is an issue of all trans people and all people being abused in education and in the workplace and in wider society. Stonewall's trans report in 2018 found that 41% of trans people have experienced hate crime due to their gender identity in the past 12 months. I was one of those people. On a bus in this very town, I was called a disgrace to God, a Satanist and everything, just for my hair. Now, this abuse cannot continue. We need to push to make sure that people are educated, not just about women's rights, but also trans rights, because trans rights are human rights. Trans men are men, trans women are women, and non-binary people are people. No matter how much the gender-critical people in society will argue against us, we are here and we are queer. And I believe that any motion concerning sexual harassment and violence should always consider it to be gender-based rights, making sure that we are all protected. We don't want to erase the rights of any women at all. I think everybody in this world deserves equal rights. What I'm saying is we need to make sure that we, as trans people, are equally protected to our cis female counterparts. Thank you very much, Conference.
Dwi Stephanie Lynch, Aberafan CLP, Dwi'n Dysgu Cymraeg. Is that okay? Diolch. I would first like to thank the Labour-led government for leading a comprehensive and innovative curriculum across Wales. Violence and sexual violence is a conversation that unfortunately we all need to have in schools. I'm disgusted to say that we live in a world where adults do things to children, that aren't appropriate, and they need to learn that that is the case. It is our duty to ensure that children are made aware of what can happen to them and arm them with the right information to speak up to a trusted adult. But it's not just sexual violence. If any social worker, teacher, or anyone would have told me as a child that it is not okay to hit your child, I would have spoken up. It is that simple. I was not made aware that these things should not be happening to me. I was not told that I should not have been battered as a child. If I would have been told this, I would have told someone about it, and it would have been able to stop. I've lost track of what I was saying now. I am glad to say that we have now fully made physical punishment illegal, and that means that the people, yeah. But the issue is, a child does not know what Senedd policy is, and a child does not know what is and isn't illegal, especially when it's a new law. This law will not protect a single child without us having these conversations with children in our educational environments. I lived through 16 years of physical abuse. I'm glad to say that the perpetrator did go to prison, but I'd rather it not happened at all. I was not told, thank you, I was not told, I was not told that my dad has to feed me. I was not told that my dad is not allowed to take a belt to me. I'm not going to give any more details than that, but I just want to highlight the importance that we need to have these conversations without us telling our children that adults shouldn't be touching you in that way. Adults shouldn't be hitting you in that way. And there are people in Wales, there's a campaign in Wales to stop this. There is a campaign in Wales right now that's telling people that our educators are paedophiles for trying to teach our children about consent and trying to teach our children what they have a right to. It's not just adults, it's not just women, it's not just non-binary people that have a right to their own body, it is children as well. So, conference, I'd like to ask you to support this motion, but not just support this motion, to arm our children with the information they need to speak up. Thank you.
Thank you, delegates. I've got time for one more round of speakers. Delegate there. Delegate there. Delegate there waving the paper. Well done.
Jill German, Vale of Clwyd, CLP. I'm speaking for the motion for music education. I've spent many years as a teacher, and I'm going to open with the things that you very often hear are good arguments for robust music education in our schools. It develops connections in the brain. It develops a creativity that can open up careers that may not otherwise be open, and it develops self-esteem, and it develops a sense of achievement. And all of that and more is really, really important. However, I work now with children in schools across Wales. I work with those schools on a project called The Price of Pupil Poverty. And believe me, there is a price that those children pay. Not least with the kind of experiences that are open to children from families who have enough money to pay for them. Children from low income and disadvantaged backgrounds face a huge barrier from the minute they walk into school. They see things going on around them that they can't take part in. And music and the way that it has fast become an extracurricular activity is exactly one of them. They can't go along to the after-school activities that involve learning how to play an instrument because their parents can't afford to pay for it. They can't afford to pay for the equipment that they need. And they can't arrange the later pickups that are involved, or the fact that they may miss their school transport. All these things present a barrier. And we need to make sure that the richness that a music education can bring is open to every single child in Wales. Every child in Wales deserves the chance to bask in the richness of our Welsh culture and the music that is so inherent in part of that. Every child deserves the chance to play an instrument or the chance to compose should they wish, and they deserve the chance to carry that on if that's something that speaks to them through their lives. However, they also deserve the chance to realise the joy that music brings and the way that it enriches our souls and it makes life worth living very often. It really matters just as part of life. They may not go on to be musicians, but they will go on to have a joy in music that will take them through those tough days and the good days and all the other days, just as it has with mine. So, conference, I'm speaking very much in support of this because we need this written right through our curriculum so every single child knows the joy that music can bring. And the new curriculum is an absolute ideal chance to make this happen. So, conference, please support this motion today. I very much support it and I want to see it right through our schools. Thank you so much.
Hi Conference, Meg Thomas speaking, delegate from the GMB, speaking on the sexual harassment in schools motion. And so this motion I found quite concerning about the gap around LGBTQ plus pupils and LGBTQ schools. As we heard brilliantly from Heleb earlier, like, LGBTQ plus people disproportionately experience hate crime, including sexual harassment, and especially at schools. This motion does nothing for the LGBTQ plus person experiencing sexual harassment in their school who can't even report it because they're too afraid to come out to their parents. This motion does nothing for the LGBTQ plus to the LGBT plus people who feel alone in their school and are experiencing this harassment with no support and no understanding within their school of how to support them best. I think this is especially concerning because this is something that is on the rise. LGBTQ plus people will tell you that experiences of hate crime and experiences of street harassment is going up. I live in Cardiff, what's supposed to be a safe haven for LGBTQ plus people in Wales. And just last year, a man was murdered in a homophobic hate crime incident. I've experienced homophobic harassment on the street. I've seen the transphobic harassment and transphobic abuse that's put up all over Wales and all through our cities. We are doing some incredible things in this party. The LGBTQ plus action plan was absolutely fantastic. And seeing also, not just that, but the level of interaction that Labour did with LGBT plus communities is incredible, and the support that's going into education is fantastic. But we need to keep working on this. Us supporting and us standing with LGBTQ plus people, all LGBTQ plus people, and all women is not a given. It is active work that we have to pursue each time that we sit in this whole conference. The conference, I ask you, please remember in this motion that there is a huge group of vulnerable people who need our support and who need us to stand up and protect them from sexual harassment within schools. Thank you.
Conference, I have the last word. I'm honoured, I'm a woman. We usually do. I taught for, just saying, I taught and was head of PSHE for 40 years in the Valleys Comprehensive School, of which I'm very proud. And I'm even more proud of the fact that my daughter is gay. But I'm less proud of the fact that as a teacher and a mother, I felt that I failed her when she was growing up. I wasn't there. I didn't recognize it. I was not professional enough. I wasn't educated enough. Whatever it was, I am now determined to put right for everybody else's daughter coming through, that they have a better experience. She doesn't hold it against me. She said, Mum, you were fab. I said, but I know. There was never that conversation either to her teachers or to me as a mum. And those little developments in each life are going on at this moment. With the national curriculum, we have a golden opportunity with the review. But as a school governor, I realised one or two things. First of all, we were asking teachers to deliver personal health and sexual relationships, whatever you want to call it, it's changed so many times. Fundamentally, is about safer relationships. We were asking teachers to deliver those sessions in schools with no training, certainly not in teacher training facilities. At one point, I had 17 different staff. If they had a gap in the timetable, they were delivering what I consider to be a crucial thing. We need good practice. We also need the opportunity. During COVID, schools have not been able to meet in the clusters in the way that they could to share good practice. So there's a practical issue there moving forward as a governor. But fundamentally, if we do not address the fact that our youngsters are having their sex education through the internet, boys tell me, I asked them a question. I said, would you find out about all this then, boys? Used to be in the playground, isn't it? Oh, God forbid. But now it's far, far worse. It's through pornography on their mobile phones in the silence where they can't interact with us. We have to address it full on because it's a growing issue. But the other issue that's equally important is the idea that they see safer relationships, they can identify with it, and that the language that teachers use, the language that people use in sports environments, okay? The way that people interact by the way teachers talk to pupils, the whole concept of the way we talk to one another as individuals with respect and understanding is fundamental. And I can only commend this motion 10 from the people that put forward this motion. I know feel very passionately about it. But may I finally say that composite C is extremely important. There is a voice there that needed to be heard. And I think that it would be really good if conference could respect Women's Aid and Estin looks very carefully at that composite as well. Conscious of time. Thank you for giving me the last word. And thank you for everything you do in Jeremy. Thank you.
Thank you, Gallagher. Thank you, conference. I think you'll all agree that was a great debate. And to close the debate, we have Deb Davies on behalf of the WEC. Deb.
Thank you, conference. Firstly, I'm a councillor, proud to be a councillor standing again in Newport, but particularly proud to be a Cabinet Member for Education and Skills, but especially proud to be a governor for schools for the last 20 years and a chair of governor for the last 15 years. Therefore, I'm pleased to be presenting this WEC response to the education debate. Conference, this debate has showcased the values and creativity of our movement and our commitment to a fairer Wales. As Mark said from this stage yesterday, despite the pandemic, the Welsh Labour government has been working rapidly to put our manifesto into action. Motion 8, we recommend to support. Jeremy has confirmed that he's taking forward our plans to introduce a national music service, and the WEC recommends support for Motion 8. More than £6 million in new funding was announced as part of these plans recently, and the Minister has confirmed that this commitment is firmly placed as part of the new programme for Wales. And he wanted me to additionally add, further to this, the Welsh Government is about to introduce a national new music plan, as was proposed from this floor a few moments ago. And Jeremy intends to make an announcement on this in the next few weeks. We absolutely agree with the spirit of the motion, and Jeremy has set out the action we are taking. Our programme for government commits us to work with trade unions to put forward options for a more sustainable supply teaching model and fair work at its heart. Conference, on the basis set out by the motion, WEC is seeking for motion 9 to be remitted. Motion 10, support. The motions before us relating to sexual harassment demonstrate that Welsh Labour is leading the way on this agenda in government. The contributions from members in this debate only serves to reinforce this strength. We can be proud from that starting point in this debate that rests on far-reaching legislation and an exciting and progressive new curriculum. As with the National Music Service, our ministers have already taken action to further our manifesto pledge on violence against women, domestic abuse and sexual violence. The Violence Against Women, Domestic Abuse and Sexual Violence National Strategy was published for consultation on the 7th of December. It makes clear the need for strong leadership from politicians and leaders in public service, leaders in the voluntary sector and civic society, leaders in business, the care and education sectors, and crucially from all of us as individuals. We have personally to take responsibility to lead within society, to challenge and educate. And this action reflects the call in motion 10 and WEC recommends support. Composite C is to remit, but please be assured, however, Jeremy supports the principles that have been put forward this afternoon, and he will bear those comments in mind when he takes policy through. He's absolutely listened today, and he wanted me to make that assurance. The comprehensive approach that's been taken part of this new strategy has been designed to address the issues already that are raised in Composite C and in the Estin report. Our strategy sets out the Welsh Government and its partners will work together to increase awareness among children and young people on the importance of safe, equal and healthy relationships. And this will help all children understand that abusive behaviour is always wrong. The final strategy will have a budget and work programme that sets out what action we'll be taking to implement our 2021 manifesto pledge. It is not possible to change the current plans which have been developed with partners based on the evidence to take forward the different approach in Composite C. However, we note that ministers have committed to working with partners to explore this call as they take the strategy forward. They'll update the Welsh Policy Forum on progress. Conference on this basis, the WEC is seeking for Composite C to be remitted. Thank you.
Thank you, Deb. And now we're going to move to the votes, which will be by show of hands in the first instance. So motion A, music education. The WEC recommendation is to support. All those in favour? Thank you, that's carried. Motion 9 was remitted by the fantastic speaker we had from the SEA, so thank you very much. Motion 10, sexual harassment and violence among adolescents. The WEC recommendation is to support. All those in favour? Thank you. Any against? That's carried. And Composite C, sexual harassment and violence among adolescents. The Moves didn't remit it, therefore the WEC's recommendation is to oppose. So all those in favour? Thank you. All those against? That falls. Thank you. I'd now like to ask Chief Scrutineer Dave Bazina to give us the results of the card votes. Dave?
Good afternoon, Conference. Dave Bazina, GMB Delegate and Chief Scrutineer. Card votes say, it's like the old joke, you don't see any for hours and 3 of them come at once. But anyway, thanks again to my colleague tellers and scrutineers. So I'll deal with card vote 3 first, which was the motion, Composite A on renting. And I'll deal with the affiliated organisations first. The percentage for 1.83, giving a weighted percentage of 0.91. Against 98.17%, giving a weighted vote of 49.09. Within the party unit section, for 70.83%, giving a weighted vote of 35.42, and against 29.17%, giving a weighted vote of 14.58%, and therefore the ballot result for 36.33%, against 63.67%, and therefore that motion is lost. Moving on to the democracy review, and just to remind conference, these are rule changes, therefore they will need a 2/3 majority in favour to be passed. In the on card vote 1, in the affiliated organisation section, percentage for 100, against 0. Weighted 50% for, 0 against. In the party unit section, votes for 97.22%, against 2.78%. That's a weighted vote of 48.61% for and 1.39% against. And therefore the final result for 98.61% and against 1.39%. Not much debate that that meets the 2/3 threshold, so that is clearly passed. And finally, conference on card vote 2 on democracy review in the affiliated organisation section, percentage for 100, against 0, giving a weighted vote of 50% for and 0% against. In the party unit section, votes for 100%, votes against 0, weighted vote 50% against 0. These were the easiest calculations we've had in a good many years. I can safely declare the result of that for 100%, against 0. Thank you very much, conference.
Thanks, Dave. And clearly, your abacus wasn't needed this year on those votes. Conference. Look, it's been a great weekend, and as I said at the opening, I've been able to see people face to face has been absolutely fantastic. But as ever with these things, it's over too soon. So a few thank yous from me, really, to all the venue staff, to all the fantastic Welsh Labour staff who worked tirelessly to get this event going and run it seamlessly. So thank you all. You've done a fantastic job. And for all of you, obviously, for making conference such a success. Now, of course, it's time to get out knocking on doors, doing what we do best, and making sure we win all those elections in all those town halls up and down Wales. So make sure you're registered to vote. Make sure your friends and family are registered to vote. But of course, only if they're going to vote Welsh Labour. And of course, also question why you've got friends that aren't going to vote Welsh Labour if that is the case. So thanks again, conference. We'll see you the same time next year. And all that remains is to close the conference in a traditional way. So get your best Welsh singing voices ready. And we're going to have a bit of a sing-song with a red flag. So if you could all stand up, please. The words are going to come up here, I think. I'll sing it for ages because we're all singing it at the same time. Yeah. Do we get a tune? I don't know. Don't know if we get a tune or not. Do we get a tune?
Shall I start off?
His deepest red, he's shrouded off our martyr dead. Our nether limbs grew stiff and cold, the